Hey guys, tonight we're going somewhere dim, smoky, loud, and deeply sticky. Picture it, a twisted little town clinging to the edge of a forest, its cobblestone streets slick with last night's rain and something less identifiable. A crooked wooden sign groans in the wind, its paint long faded but still unmistakably bearing a mug of ale. This is your destination. Not a palace. Not a battlefield. A medieval tavern, and spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this. See, you're not exactly rolling into town like a pampered noble with a retinue and satin breeches. You're a traveler. On foot. Maybe a peddler, maybe a mercenary, maybe just someone running from something. You've been trudging through mud for days. Your boots are soaked, your clothes stink of sheep, and your last meal was a suspicious hand pie 2 villages back that may have contained more feathers than flour. Your arrival is about as glamorous as you'd expect. You slip on a stone, bark your shin on a wagon axle, and nearly get trampled by a cart full of turnips. A child laughs at you. You consider weeping, but remember you need water for tears, and you're too dehydrated to spare any. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. Only do it if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments, where are you watching from, and what time is it there? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You limp your way toward the crooked tavern sign, eyes locked on the faint glow from within. That's firelight. That's safety. That's soup. Hopefully, the closer you get, the more the smell hits you: smoke, stale beer, wet dog, and onions. Always onions. The combination is weirdly comforting. You push open the warped door with your shoulder. It groans like an old man, and you step into a world where time seems to swirl with the steam. It's hot inside, and the air is thick enough to chew. A fire blazes in a central hearth, its smoke only mostly escaping through a hole in the roof. Candles sputter along wooden beams, dripping wax onto patrons' hair and meals without discrimination. The floorboards are uneven and vaguely moist. The ceiling is low enough to make you duck instinctively. The walls lean in like conspirators. This place is alive, in the same way a compost heap is alive, warm, layered, and just on the edge of fermentation. You're greeted by a murmur of voices, the clink of mugs, and a loud snore from the corner. Someone glances up from a dice game just long enough to assess your usefulness. You fail to impress. There's no welcome party. No good evening, traveler. Just a glance from the tavern keeper, who notes your entrance with all the warmth of a man calculating how many coins he can squeeze from your pockets before you collapse. You shuffle forward. Your legs ache, your back protests, and you think your sock might have merged with your foot permanently. But you've made it. You're indoors. You're near heat. And if you're lucky, you'll be near ale in minutes, but the space is tighter than it looked. Tables are crammed shoulder to shoulder, mostly occupied by muddy boots, ragged cloaks, and people who look like they've either just committed a crime or are thinking about it. You hesitate. Is there even space for you? A dog, or maybe a goat, wanders under the nearest table and nibbles something unidentifiable. A man leans back too far and topples off his stool with a thud. No one helps him. He groans and begins to snore. You glance around and spot one free chair, barely more than a milking stool, next to a woman with a hawk on her shoulder and a beard more impressive than yours. You sit. Cautiously. She doesn't acknowledge you. The hawk stares. You stare back. You lose. The tavern is noisy, but it's the kind of noise that has a rhythm to it. Dice clatter, ale sloshes, someone laughs too hard and then coughs up what might be a lung. Somewhere, a lute is being poorly tuned. There's an argument happening by the fire that involves 4 farmers and 1 suspiciously smug pig, and yet, you relax. Just a little. This isn't home. But it's not outside. Not anymore. A server breezes past your table. She's carrying 3 mugs in each hand and scowling like it's a competitive sport. You catch her eye and raise 2 fingers. One for ale, one for mercy. She nods with a grunt and disappears into the haze. You lean back against the wall, or what passes for one. It gives slightly. The wood is damp and smells of moss. There's a faded tapestry nailed up, depicting what might once have been a hunt but now looks more like animals reenacting interpretive dance. Despite the noise, the smells, the questionable structural integrity of the ceiling, something about this place settles in your bones. You're not entirely safe. But you're not in the rain. And for tonight, that's enough. A voice slurs something in your direction. You turn to find an old man with one eye and no teeth, holding out a cracked cup. He gestures for a toast. You clink your cup to his. He wheezes something about the king's horses and then burps loud enough to startle the hawk. You don't know what's in store for you here. But if this tavern has anything to say about it, the next few hours will be strange, warm, slightly alarming, and, just maybe, unforgettable. The door thuds shut behind you, muting the howl of the wind outside. Inside, the tavern breathes around you. You stand for a moment, blinking away the blur of smoke and shadow, trying to adjust. The flickering light from the hearth throws silhouettes against the walls. They are jagged, oversized, and a little theatrical, like puppets cast by fire and imagination. The sign outside hadn't lied, this is a tavern. Or maybe it did lie. Technically, it's more of a hybrid. Part alehouse, part inn, part local court, part rumor factory, with a splash of barn thrown in. That goat from earlier? Definitely still roaming. You hear it somewhere to your left, snorting like it's heard your thoughts. The structure itself is holding together, but only just. The walls lean out in some places and inward in others, as if unsure which way they'd rather collapse. The ceiling beams hang low, thick with smoke residue and spiderwebs that look like they pay rent. The tavern's bones groan as the fire pops, and the floorboards respond in chorus with every shuffled step. You scan the room, every table is an ecosystem. One near the door is clearly claimed by 3 men in matching cloaks, all hunched around a pitcher, speaking in the kind of hushed tones that make you want to not listen. Another table has a family, tired-looking parents and a child gnawing a piece of bread like it owes him money. At the largest table sits a boisterous group of what might be soldiers, or mercenaries, or just very confident drunkards with sharp objects. In the far corner is a heap of cloaks and limbs. You assume, and correctly, that there is a human under there. Whether he's sleeping, dead, or deeply contemplating the ceiling is unclear. Either way, no one's checked in a while. Your eyes settle on the centerpiece, the hearth. It's large, wide enough to roast a pig if anyone had one to spare, and the flames within cast a dancing orange glow across the uneven walls. Pots hang above the fire, bubbling with the slow, deliberate gurgle of something edible. Probably. A woman in a stained apron stirs one of them with a stick that may once have been a shovel. The tavern keeper appears from the back. He's broad, red-faced, and wiping his hands on a rag that's just moving grease from one place to another. He doesn't greet you. He just nods. Not a welcoming nod. A bookkeeping nod. He's just marked your entrance in his mental ledger. New customer, wet boots, probably can't pay much. He disappears again without a word. You don't know if that's good or ominous. As you stand awkwardly near the entrance, someone shouts. Not at you. At a boy who just spilled something frothy onto a customer's lap. There's yelling, the clatter of a stool, and then just as quickly, laughter. You notice that most outbursts in this place end not with violence but with a sigh and another drink. For now, a narrow path opens between the tables, a result of someone finally getting up to stagger toward the door. You take your chance and slide toward a bench near the fire. This is your prize for persistence. The bench groans beneath you. It's hard, splintery, and still warmer than your bones. A mug arrives. It is slammed onto the table by the same scowling server as before. No words. Just impact. You stare at the drink. It's cloudy. Slightly fizzing. The color of dishwater left out in the sun. This is ale. Technically, you take a sip, it tastes like what would happen if bread had a midlife crisis. There's a yeasty tang, a hint of smoke, and a mysterious aftertaste that might be mushrooms or feet. Still, it's stronger than water, and probably safer too. Medieval water is more of a death lottery than a beverage. So you take another sip. It goes down easier. By the third, you're convincing yourself you like it. The table in front of you is sticky. Not a little sticky. Viscous. You place your hand down and have to peel it back. You glance at the residue. Is that wax? Syrup? A very old eel? The answer, like so many things here, is unknowable. You decide to stop asking questions. The wall beside you is covered in carvings. Names, symbols, crude drawings, and what you think might be a very sincere attempt at a horse. There's a date from 2 decades ago, and below it, someone has simply etched the word "Y." You relate, the ceiling creaks above. Someone is moving around up there. You hadn't realized there was an upper level. Whether it's a sleeping loft or a collection of raccoons in tiny boots is not clear. Behind the bar is a shelf of bottles. Some are corked, others draped in cobwebs. None of them are labeled. One of them is glowing faintly. You will not be ordering that one. The fire snaps again, sending a spray of sparks into the air. A man standing too close brushes embers from his cloak and doesn't flinch. You get the feeling he's done this before. There's a lull in the noise. Just for a moment. The whole room exhales. You hear the wind pressing against the windows, the goat making a noise of distant protest, and the rattle of dice being readied again. This place is alive in the way only old buildings are. Alive with secrets, with memories, with layers of decisions made by people long dead. Every stain tells a story. Every groove in the wood was worn by someone just like you, tired, broke, and looking for a moment of rest. You lean back again, the bench creaking like it might mutiny, and look around with new eyes. This isn't just a stop on your road. This is the road, in many ways. Taverns like this are the glue of medieval life. They're where news travels, alliances form, and boots dry. You've arrived. And like it or not, you're part of the story now. You begin to thaw. Slowly. The warmth from the fire reaches your fingers first, then your face, then seeps into your legs like honey poured over aching limbs. The ache doesn't leave. It just becomes background music. That dull, medieval hum of being alive and only mostly miserable, but you're still standing awkwardly near your borrowed bench when you realize there's a new challenge ahead, finding a seat that doesn't cause a diplomatic incident. In medieval taverns, seating is not a free-for-all. It's a quiet war of hierarchy, habit, and hunches. No signs. No reservations. Just invisible rules you don't know yet. You've already sat down once, remember? Near the hawk woman. Unfortunately, you had to move. The hawk made it clear, so now, cup in hand, you hover like a nervous ghost. A man in a faded red cloak gestures toward the other end of his bench. You think he's inviting you. Or maybe he's shooing a cat. It's unclear, but you take the risk. The bench creaks again. Everything in here creaks. You settle between the red-cloaked man and a very small, very elderly woman gnawing what might be a bone or might be a stick. She's wearing 6 layers of wool and muttering in a dialect that sounds like Latin run through a blender. Across from you, a group of locals are engaged in a lively debate about cabbage. Not trade. Not politics. Not religion. Just cabbage. One insists that purple cabbage is for the weak. Another claims he once saw a cabbage that sang, and the third has fallen asleep mid-sentence, head resting gently on a ladle. The man beside you offers his hand. You shake it. His grip is firm. Too firm. Like someone trying to assert dominance in a handshake tournament. Osric, he says. You consider lying but decide honesty might be safer. You give your name. He nods once and returns to nursing a mug the size of a child's head. A new arrival bursts through the door, drenched and fuming. The wind screams in behind him like it's trying to join the party. Several patrons shout in protest. Someone throws a crust. The door slams shut again. No one moves to help him. You realize that in this place, seating is survival. Every table has a story, a rhythm. People gather by trade, family, or suspicion. Strangers like you have to dance between alliances. Sit too close to the regulars, and you'll be sniffed out. Sit too isolated, and you're either a thief or worse, an unpaid minstrel. The hearth is prime real estate. You've already lost that seat once. A burly man with soot-streaked cheeks had glared at you until your soul briefly left your body. He now lounges there, boots up, face glowing from fire and ale. You envy him. Deeply, a child, possibly feral, scurries under the tables collecting dropped crumbs. She hisses at you when you make eye contact. You nod respectfully and look away. A large man with a scar across his nose tries to sit on a stool that isn't there. He falls. No one helps. He laughs like it was intentional and begins humming to himself while laying face down. You silently promise never to drink whatever he drank. Your bench companion, Osric, leans in. You want advice? You nod, unsure if he means life advice or seating strategy. Keep your back to the wall. Always, he says, tapping his mug for emphasis. Not for thieves. For vomit. You blink. He nods sagely. This is not the advice you expected. But it feels real. From across the room, a chair screeches. Someone's been asked to leave. Loudly. A smaller man, possibly a tax collector judging by his expression, is shown the door by a woman twice his size. She doesn't touch him. She just stands up. The message is clear. The crowd readjusts. Like water flowing into a new shape, people shift, stand, reseat. You remain still, hoping to remain invisible. The muttering woman next to you begins to sing. It's a lullaby, maybe. Or a threat. Her voice is scratchy, like someone taught a bagpipe to whisper. Above the bar, a wooden beam is carved with dozens of notches. Some say they're tallies for mugs served. Others claim they mark each time the tavern escaped a fire. Still others say it's just where people sharpen knives when bored. Historians still argue whether taverns like this served primarily as inns or as community halls. In reality, they were both and neither. Some were government-regulated alehouses. Others, like this one, operated in that delicious gray space between legality and outright defiance. You stretch your legs under the table and knock something soft. It squeaks. You flinch. It might have been a rat. It might have been a very unlucky chicken. Above you, in the rafters, a cat watches. You don't know who it belongs to. Possibly no one. Possibly the building itself. It stares like it's judging your posture. Suddenly, the door slams open again. Everyone flinches. A tall figure enters, cloaked and silent. The room goes quiet. Not out of fear, but curiosity. Newcomers always change the room's temperature. This could be a knight. Could be a merchant. Could be someone with plague. Exciting, the figure lowers their hood. It's just another soaked traveler. Everyone relaxes. Someone yells, buy a drink or buy a shovel. Laughter returns, you finish your mug. You've earned your space now. You've laughed. You've flinched. You've bonded with a goat. The tavern begins to accept you. Not warmly, but like a loose coin found under a bench. Maybe useful. Probably sticky, you found your seat. For now. You brace yourself and order another drink. You're not sure whether it's the warm haze of firelight or the first mug fermenting in your belly, but your hand trembles slightly as you pass the coin. The scowling server snatches it with the reflexes of a hawk and slams another mug down in front of you before you can blink. This time, the ale is slightly darker. Or the cup is dirtier. Hard to say. You take a sip. It tastes like disappointment. That's the closest description your brain offers. Flat, vaguely sour, and with the afterbite of damp grain left to ponder its life choices. There's a hint of something herbal, though whether it was added intentionally or fell in accidentally from a passing monk is unclear. Still, it's liquid. It's warmish. It's not actively trying to kill you. That's a win. Historically speaking, ale was the drink of choice across medieval Europe, especially for common folk. It was brewed at home, served in taverns like this, and consumed at every meal. Children drank it. Monks drank it. Even nuns brewed their own, which makes sense if you've ever tried surviving on boiled cabbage and prayers. Now, this isn't the ale of modern-day craft enthusiasts with ironic beards and custom hops. Medieval ale was more of a gritty, short-lived gruel with bubbles. It barely kept, often went sour, and could range wildly in strength. Some batches left you mildly jolly. Others made you hug statues and call them father. And you, lucky traveler, have just been served something in the middle of that spectrum. It's not foul, exactly. But it makes you nostalgic for water, and you haven't trusted water in weeks. The man next to you, Osric, your sudden drinking mentor, downs his mug in one long, heroic gulp and belches loud enough to unsettle the rafters. Best you'll get in this town, he grins. At least it doesn't come with worms. Your eyes widen. He laughs. You take another sip. Grit. There's definitely grit. You glance into the mug and swirl it. There's sediment. You pretend it's spice. Some places toss in herbs. Osric continues, wiping foam from his beard with his sleeve. Bog myrtle, sometimes rosemary. Helps with the bitterness. Or the rot. You nod as if you've known this your entire life. What you don't realize yet is that tavern ale isn't just drink. It's currency. It oils conversation, mutes grudges, and turns strangers into storytellers. With every sip, the tavern gets louder, warmer, and looser around the edges. A man behind you starts to sing. Badly. But confidently. This is the important part. Someone at the hearth starts tapping their mug like a drum. A woman joins in with a hand clap rhythm that is technically music if you squint at it sideways. Suddenly, the tavern is a living, breathing thing. One organism made of clinking cups, half-remembered lyrics, and the occasional hiccup. This is the golden hour of the medieval evening. That brief window between tired and too drunk. Everyone's still upright. No one's been stabbed. Yet, you take a third sip. It's growing on you. Or you're growing duller. You're not sure which. Nearby, a young man argues passionately that his uncle's recipe for oat ale would have cured the king's boils if only he tried it. A skeptical onlooker mutters something about boil curses and pours another round. Historians still debate whether taverns regularly serve strong ale or if most medieval drinks were low in alcohol, safer than water but not intoxicating. The truth probably lies somewhere in between. Depending on region, season, and whether the brewer was paying attention, you might get something that gently numbed your tongue or something that made you forget your own name. This drink, whatever it is slowly working its way into your joints. You stop hunching quite so tightly. Your boots don't feel as wet. Even your travel blisters seem less hateful. you hear a clink beside you. Osric has ordered a new mug. He raises it toward you. To surviving another day without being kicked by a cow. You return the toast. A woman down the table shouts, "To cows." And it echoes through the room. The whole tavern raises their drinks. The toast spreads, inexplicably, and suddenly "To cows" becomes the accidental motto of the evening. You take a bigger swig this time. The bitterness bites, but you welcome it. It tastes like your day, uneven, half-fermented, but oddly satisfying. At the next table, someone tries to light a pipe with a candle stub and succeeds only in setting his own sleeve alight. He pats it out calmly and laughs like it's an old joke. No one panics. Fires are just another flavor in the tavern bouquet. You overhear another drinker explaining that he once drank ale so strong it summoned a ghost. He's very insistent about this. He describes the ghost as damp and judgmental. A listener asks if the ghost was his ex-wife. He doesn't laugh. A small bowl of something is passed around. Not food. Possibly salt. Or dried herbs. Or powdered mushroom. Everyone dips a finger. You don't. You've made enough poor choices today. You're halfway through your mug when you realize something truly medieval. This drink is making you talk. You're telling Osric about your journey. About the storm. About the merchant who sold you boots that leak. About the bishop's clerk who snored like a walrus. About the goat that followed you for a day and then disappeared. Osric chuckles, then tells you about the time he got into a drinking contest with a monk and woke up married to a chimney sweep. You're not sure if he's joking. The ale flows. The room hums. The stories get stranger. The laughs louder. And somewhere in your belly, warmth takes root. This drink might be muddy, sour, and flecked with mystery grain. But in a world of cold rain, colder roads, and even colder innkeepers, it is, somehow, exactly what you needed. You've finally hit that moment when your stomach remembers it exists. It growls, loudly enough that the old woman beside you stops gnawing her stick bone and eyes you suspiciously. Even the hawk tilts its head. The ale has soothed your spirit, sure, but now your body wants substance. And not the emotional kind. Luckily, the scent wafting from the hearth has intensified. Smoky, greasy, onion heavy. The smell alone is enough to bring tears to your eyes. Not emotional tears, but the kind your nose makes when it's unsure whether something is appetizing or a chemical weapon. You follow the trail with your eyes to the large blackened pot above the flames, where the cook is stirring with what might be the handle of a broken rake. There's no menu here. No laminated options. No price list. The tavern serves exactly what the tavern has. And tonight, what it has is stew. You don't ask for details. You just nod when the serving girl growls, "You eating?" and hand her a coin that she tests with her teeth before shoving into her apron. A few minutes later, a wooden bowl is slammed in front of you. No spoon. No explanation. Just a bowl of something hot, brownish, and lumpy. You stare at it. It stares back, then you eat. The stew is thick, somewhere between porridge and regret. It's full of mystery chunks, some soft, some chewy, and one that might be a pebble. There are carrots, definitely. Possibly turnip. And meat. Probably. It's hard to tell. Whatever animal it was, it lived a hard life. Possibly underground. You chew carefully. Not because of flavor, since there's little enough of that, but to avoid breaking a tooth on something the cook forgot to remove. Like a knuckle. Or an idea, but it's hot. It's filling. And after days of foraged roots and questionable pies, it tastes like salvation. You take another bite. Your stomach sends back a message that sounds suspiciously like a hallelujah. Historically, tavern fare was exactly this. Cheap, hearty, and designed to pad the stomach before, during, and after drinking. Stews were common because they could stretch limited ingredients over many mouths, and because no one could tell if the meat was fresh once it simmered long enough. You slurp, ignoring the suspicious stringy bit hanging from your spoonless chunk. Bread appears, a wedge of something hard enough to be used as a weapon. You break off a piece and dip it in the stew. It softens just enough not to chip your molars. Progress. At the hearth, the cook wipes her brow with the back of her hand, looks into the pot, shrugs, and tosses in something green. Possibly a leaf. Possibly a mouse. You decide not to ask. A man 2 stools down insists loudly that his stew once contained an entire eel. He says this with pride, like it's a badge of honor. Someone else mutters that eels are too valuable for stew. A third says he once found a toe in his. Everyone laughs, then glances down into their bowls. You eat faster. The goat reappears, sniffing near your bench. Someone tosses it a crust. It snorts, unimpressed. The hawk eyes it from its perch, a silent threat from the animal kingdom. You offer Osric a bit of bread. He declines, saying it smells like ambition. You're not sure what that means, but you nod wisely. Then you notice something peculiar. People are talking more. Not just louder, but longer. The food has changed the rhythm of the room. The clatter has softened into chatter. Stew breaks down barriers. The act of chewing encourages conversation, and the tavern becomes less about noise and more about murmurs. Someone starts humming again. Not a song this time, just a low, tuneless drone, like a kettle about to boil. The sound is oddly comforting. A server makes the rounds with a bucket of what she claims is gravy. It looks like rainwater mixed with soot. A few patrons take some. Most politely decline. One dips his finger in and winces like he's remembered a past life. Your bowl is nearly empty. You use the last piece of bread to scrape the sides, pretending it's a luxurious ritual instead of survival instinct. You haven't eaten well, but you've eaten. That's enough. Then, like magic, a plate is placed beside your bowl. Cheese, not much. Just a chunk. Hard, crumbly, and definitely aged. Possibly by accident. But it's cheese. Real, salty, sharp cheese. The kind that sticks to your teeth and makes your eyes water slightly. You take a tiny bite. Bliss. Cheese in medieval taverns wasn't always standard. It depended on location, season, and whether the cows had been generous lately. But when it was available, it was treasured, especially hard cheese that kept through winter and traveled well. Osric leans over, eyes your cheese, then gestures with a half-eaten radish. If they're serving that, means someone rich passed through yesterday. Left a will behind. You nod solemnly. Cheese politics. Very serious. You look around the tavern. People are wiping mouths, licking fingers, leaning back with the post-meal sigh of the moderately satisfied. No one's stuffed. No one's thrilled. But no one's starving anymore. It's a good night. Even the hawk looks relaxed. You settle back on your bench. Your stomach is full. Your mug is half empty. And for the first time in days, you're warm. Not just on your skin, but inside. The tavern might be crooked, smoky, and full of mysterious smells. But right now, it feels like a little piece of safety in a world that offers very little of that. You even forgive the stew. You're not sure what it was, but you're grateful it happened. You lean back, cradling your mug, and glance around the tavern with fresh eyes, now that you've eaten and your internal organs have stopped threatening mutiny. Everything looks a little softer, a little hazier, like someone smeared a thin layer of lard over your perception. Comfort does that. Or ale, but then you notice something strange. Someone across the room is licking their plate. Vigorously, someone else is blowing their nose into a chunk of bread, and the man next to you is picking his teeth with a chicken bone that might still be attached to something. Ah yes. Dinner is done, and now the manners begin, or rather, the lack of them. You try to remember the last time you saw a fork. Answer: never. In this world, people eat with knives, fingers, spoons when available, and the occasional shard of stale bread functioning as both scoop and sponge. This is the age of trenchers. Those slabs of yesterday's bread used as edible plates. Yours is still on the table, now soggy and structurally unsound. You poke it gently. It sighs. You leave it alone. A man across from you belches a note perfect D-flat and grins as if he expects applause. He receives none, but he does get a nod of approval from a gray-haired woman with stew in her eyebrows. No one here is particularly concerned with neatness. Fingers glisten with grease. Beards cradle crumbs. Ale is sloshed liberally across tables and tunics. And yet, weirdly, it all feels normal. Medieval dining etiquette, such as it was, didn't resemble anything we'd recognize today. At least not among the common folk. Sure, lords and ladies had rules about which spoon to use for eel custard, but in a place like this, the only rule is to try not to stab your neighbor unless it's absolutely necessary. Still, there are subtle codes. You notice, for instance, that no one ever wipes their fingers on their cloak. That's sacred. Cloaks are for warmth, protection, and status. Napkins? Unheard of. Sleeves? Acceptable, if it's not your good one. There's a shared understanding of personal mess. If your mouth is full, don't talk. Not out of politeness, but because the moment you open it, someone might reach in and take your food. Someone sneezes. It's wet. It lands on the table. No one flinches. You suppress a gag and sip your ale, suddenly grateful for the sediment. Your tablemate, Osric, leans in again. Rule of thumb: don't borrow a man's knife if it's still shiny. Means he doesn't use it for food. You ask, warily, what he does use it for. Persuasion: Osric grins, a bowl clatters to the floor. The goat arrives instantly, cleans it without chewing, then vanishes. It might be running this place. You glance to your left. Someone is passing a hunk of cheese from hand to hand like a currency. No one uses a plate. One man tears off a chunk with his teeth and offers the rest to the group. Communal eating at its finest, or its most bacterial. Historians note that while upper classes had elaborate banquets with separate courses and utensils, often golden of course, the majority of the population ate in exactly the way you're witnessing now. Hunched, fast, loud, and with the same knife they used to cut rope or trim their toenails. There's no shame in it. There's no decorum either. Just survival. With a side of gravy. You spot a small boy crawling under tables with a rag, wiping up spills and stealing dropped crusts. He meets your eyes, puts a finger to his lips, and disappears like a medieval chimney goblin. At the bar, a woman swats at a man's hand as he reaches for her plate. He laughs. She doesn't. He reconsiders. A man across the room is drinking straight from a pitcher. He has no cup. Just confidence. Meanwhile, the singing from earlier returns. This time, it's a group effort. 4 or 5 voices join in. Not harmonizing, exactly. More like competing with one another in a friendly tavern version of musical combat. One line is about sheep, the next about betrayal, and the third is definitely about someone's pants. You don't understand all of it, but the vibe is deeply chaotic. Your stew bowl is still on the table, half full of something that may be gelatinous now. You consider asking if there's dessert, but decide you value your life too much. In fact, dessert is rarely a concept in this world. Sugar is expensive. Honey is hoarded. Most meals end exactly like this, with bread, ale, and the slow drift into post-dinner stupor. One man uses his empty bowl as a pillow and begins to snore softly. No one tells him to move. Someone even adjusts the bowl for his comfort. Hospitality, medieval style. There's something strangely beautiful in this chaos. It's communal, lived in, unapologetic. Everyone is too tired, too poor, or too distracted to pretend otherwise. You're witnessing the raw rhythm of medieval daily life. No filters. No Instagram lighting. Just real people eating real food in a room that smells faintly of sweat and time, and for all the smacking, slurping, and suspicious finger-licking. No one seems particularly unhappy. You watch a couple share a crust of bread and laugh like they're at a feast. You see a man feed his dog from his lap while telling a story about dragons, probably false. You even catch the hawk woman smiling, though it's hard to tell under all that beard. You pick at your bread trencher one last time. It's soggy, yes, but it's absorbed enough stew to count as a bonus course. You take a bite. It's not bad. And suddenly you understand. This, too, is a kind of etiquette. One born of hunger, thrift, and not wasting what little you have. A final belch echoes through the rafters. Someone toasts to digestion. And the tavern erupts in laughter again. You raise your mug in silent agreement, and despite the filth, the noise, and the potential for communicable disease, you can't help but feel strangely at home. The tavern hums with the easy glow of post-meal contentment and steadily rising intoxication. But now that you've properly eaten and loosely claimed a seat, you're starting to notice something else. The quiet politics of who's allowed in, and who isn't. It's not posted on a sign. It's not barked out loud. But you feel it in the glances, the long pauses, the way certain people get acknowledged with a nod and others get ignored completely. In a place where community matters, belonging is everything. And not everyone does. You watch a young man near the door hover awkwardly, hood still up, hands tucked in tight. He's clean, too clean, and his boots are far too nice for this place. Maybe a clerk. Or a noble's runaway apprentice. Either way, no one makes room for him. He shifts foot to foot like he's waiting for someone to say something, but no one does. Eventually, he turns and leaves without ever speaking. The door slams. No one notices. Osric nudges you. Didn't trust that one. Too quiet. No dust on his shoes. You glance down. Your boots are half mud, half boot. Good. You're unthreatening. In taverns like this, strangers are watched but not always welcome. Locals have their own gravity. They pull the energy of the room toward themselves. Outsiders drift around the edges, tolerated but rarely embraced. Unless, of course, they bring something valuable, news, money, stories. Or danger, and then there's the issue of women. You spot one sitting alone at the far side of the hearth. Shoulders back, jaw set, eyes hard as river stones. She's sipping ale like she owns the place. Maybe she does. But every now and then, someone eyes her a beat too long. Not with curiosity. With calculation. You've noticed already, most women here are either serving, married, or ignored. But a woman drinking alone, that draws attention. Not always the good kind. Historians still argue whether women were truly banned from many medieval taverns or simply discouraged through unspoken social codes. The truth, as always, sits in the gray areas. In villages, women might run the tavern. In cities, they might be banned after dark. And if a woman came alone, she was often mistaken for something transactional. Even now, one man starts walking toward the hearth woman. She doesn't move. Just lifts her mug, takes a slow sip, and narrows her eyes. He stops, reconsiders, and redirects toward a barrel instead. She wins, but the unspoken rules are everywhere. The tables closest to the hearth belong to locals. The shady alcove behind the curtain is for travelers. Traders, and men who don't give their real names. The benches by the window attract those who want to be seen. The stools near the latrine door. Reserved for those no one likes. The tavern keeper, burly, balding, apron clinging to his bulk like a half-hearted bib, watches it all. His eyes track every movement. Not with suspicion, but with cold calculation. He sees who's drinking fast, who's not drinking at all, who paid, and who still owes. He wipes a mug with a rag that somehow makes it dirtier. Then he glances your way. Just for a moment, you feel it, you're on his map now. He doesn't greet. He evaluates. He's judge, host, referee, and, when necessary, bouncer. And you get the sense that if a fight broke out, he'd handle it with one hand and keep stirring the stew with the other. You see someone approach him and whisper. Coins change hands. The tavern keeper nods and jerks his chin toward the back room. No words. Just directions. Deals are made here without discussion. Eye contact replaces conversation. Trust is rare. In this world, your worth is measured in usefulness. Can you sing? Fight? Tell stories? Fix things? If not, drink quietly and don't cause trouble. The door opens again. Another arrival. This time a man with a mule's patience in his walk and a sword on his hip. He carries dust like a cloak. Immediately, the room shifts, not out of fear. Out of curiosity. He's a mercenary, maybe. Or an ex-soldier. Or someone pretending to be both. He heads straight for the bar, tosses a coin, drinks in silence. No one approaches him. Yet, then, behind him, a group of loud boys stumbles in, flush-faced and reeking of fresh youth. Apprentices, maybe. Their clothes are too fine for farmhands, too messy for nobles. They try to laugh louder than necessary, throwing coins onto a table like they're betting on attention. One of them bumps into the woman near the hearth. Spills her drink, everyone goes still, the room freezes. Not from shock, but anticipation. The apprentices don't notice. They're laughing too loud, faces flushed with confidence bought by coin, not earned by scars. The woman rises slowly. Not angry. Calm, she picks up her mug, and dumps what's left of it into the boy's boot. The laughter dies. He stares. She says nothing, just sits back down. The tavern roars with approval. The boy says nothing. He's just learned something about status that won't be in any of his scrolls, and just like that, she's more local than foreign, because in here, you earn your place. Not with money. With presence. With nerve. With knowing when to speak and when to let a hawk do the talking. You shift in your seat, you're starting to see it now. The invisible latticework of this tavern society. A web of alliances, loyalties, unspoken rules, and daily rituals. And while you might still be a stranger, you're one meal, one mug, and one well-placed joke away from joining it. But for now, you sip your ale and keep listening. This place is more than just food and drink. It's a living diagram of who matters, who watches, and who walks away when the doors close, and you've just started reading the lines. The fire crackles. Mugs clink. Someone hiccups like they've been possessed by a sleepy ghost. And in the midst of it all, the tavern keeper moves slowly, deliberately, like a bear that's learned to walk upright just to avoid being bothered. You finally get a closer look at him. He's balding, yes, but not soft. He has the kind of arms that come from lifting barrels, dragging drunks, and possibly wrestling livestock. His apron might have been white once, though now it's a tapestry of stains. His shirt stretches across a belly earned honestly through stews and stress, but it's not his size or his scowl that makes people step aside when he walks past. It's the way he watches, not with malice. With calculation. This man doesn't just run the tavern. He records the room in his mind. Every drink poured, every coin pocketed, every name offered, and every one suspiciously withheld. And he doesn't write anything down. He doesn't need to, name. He growls suddenly, you blink. He's talking to you, you hesitate, then give it. No title. No story. Just your name, he grunts. That's good. Too much detail would be worse, he gestures toward the bar. Tab or coin? You pull out a coin. He inspects it, rubs it between fingers stained by years of use, and nods once, fair weight. Just like that, you exist in this place. Not fully, not yet. But now, if someone asks, the tavern keeper can say, they paid. And that alone is a kind of protection. Behind the bar is his domain. Wooden shelves stacked with bottles, jugs, ceramic pots, and one or two things best left unnamed. A ledger sits on the shelf, closed and unused. There's no ink on this man's fingers. Only grease and callus. He is more than a barkeep. He is a note of power. He knows who's cheating at dice. Who's smuggling salt. Who's wanted 3 towns over. And he knows not to say any of it unless there's profit in doing so. Historians suggest tavern keepers in medieval towns were often among the best-informed citizens. Some even doubled as spies for local lords or tax collectors. Others bribed both sides just to stay open past curfew. Information was currency. And alehouses were full of it. You watch him settle a brief dispute between 2 men over a spilled mug. There's no shouting. No lecture. Just a raised eyebrow and a calm statement, next one's on you. Both men nod. Apology accepted, he picks up a fallen bowl and hands it to the boy crawling under the tables. Wash it. No please. No thank you. And yet, it doesn't sound cruel. Just efficient. Then he steps back, leans against the wall, crosses his arms. And resumes his quiet surveillance. A man sidles up to the bar and leans in too close. The tavern keeper doesn't move. The man mutters something about supplies arriving after nightfall. The keeper grunts, slides a mug forward, and the man vanishes into the back room. You wonder how many deals happen here every night. Smuggled goods. Stolen horses. Illegal sermons. The back room has a curtain, not a door. But it might as well be iron. You glance toward it now, curious, and the tavern keeper catches your eye, just once, not threatening, but clear, not yet. That's what the look says. You haven't earned that level of trust. You nod and turn back to your drink. At one point, he picks up a small iron bell from behind the counter and rings it once. Loud. Clear. Sharp. The room freezes. Even the hawk shifts, then he announces, no credit past midnight. There are grumbles, eye rolls, and 1 or 2 men quietly checking their pockets, then the noise resumes. That's the thing. He doesn't rule by fear. He rules by predictability. No one likes surprises in a tavern. If the roof caves in, that's one thing. But if the ale runs out early because someone forgot to collect tabs, that's a hanging offense. You overhear 2 farmers debating whether he used to be a soldier. One claims he saw a tattoo on the man's wrist once, a sigil of the king's army. The other swears he was a monk who got thrown out for fermenting communion wine. Historians still argue whether tavern keepers were mostly ex-soldiers, failed merchants, or just people with an unusually high tolerance for nonsense. Likely, it was a mix. But they were rarely soft. Taverns were full of heat, theft, and the occasional murder by chair. You needed backbone, he speaks again. This time to the bard who's been quietly tuning a lute in the corner, now. Just one word, and the music begins. The bard doesn't argue. Doesn't ask for a fee. He just starts playing. And the tavern subtly rearranges itself to listen, because when the tavern keeper says now, the answer is never why. You feel a little safer knowing he's watching. Which is absurd, considering he might sell your name to the wrong person for 2 coppers and a plum, but still, this is his kingdom. His hearth. His house of disorder, and for tonight, you're under his roof. He glances your way again. You raise your mug, he doesn't smile, but he doesn't look away, and that, somehow, is enough. It starts with a glance. A nod. A subtle jerk of the chin from a man by the fire toward the curtain at the back of the tavern. You wouldn't have noticed if you hadn't been watching everything by now. You're part of a living tapestry, woven in but still unraveling the patterns. The man he gestures to has the look of someone who always stands near a door. Wiry. Alert. He waits a beat, then rises. No words. No noise. Just motion. And within seconds, he vanishes behind the curtain. That's when you realize something. There's another world behind that threadbare drape. It isn't hidden, exactly. But it certainly isn't for everyone. Osric leans toward you, like he's been waiting for your curiosity to finally click. That's the side room, he says, sipping slowly. Where business gets done. You raise an eyebrow, not that kind of business, he adds. Though the grin he offers says otherwise. Sometimes, maybe that kind too, he gestures at the curtain with a lazy nod. That's where coin moves without clinking. Where messages get handed off with handshakes. Where pigs become chickens on parchment, if you catch my meaning. You do. Sort of. Osric leans closer, voice low now. You don't go in unless someone tells you to. Behind the curtain, you hear a man laugh. Muffled. Controlled. Not loud or wild. Just amused. Someone has either won something, or someone else has lost more than they expected. This is where the real economy of the tavern lives. In medieval taverns, these back rooms, or side rooms or cellars, were often the unofficial hubs of local trade. Yes, you could drink and gossip out front, but if you had something worth whispering about, you took it to the side. Grain deals. Black market iron. Marriage contracts. Hired muscle. Confessions. Betrayals. You glance back at the curtain, it doesn't move. The tavern itself is still alive with warmth and clatter. A man tries to recite a poem about a fish and forgets all the rhymes. The goat returns, tail wagging like it belongs here. The bard plucks quietly now, the melody drifting soft across tankards and elbows, but that back room hums with a different energy. It's darker there. The candlelight from the main hall doesn't stretch far enough to touch it. No hearth glows behind the curtain. No music drifts in. Just voices. Low and serious, you see a woman enter now. Her cloak could be merchant's garb, or a disguise meant to pass for one. She drops a pouch on the bar, heavy enough to thud, before disappearing behind the curtain. The tavern keeper doesn't even look up. He pockets the coin and keeps wiping mugs that haven't changed in cleanliness all night. Local lords used to send messengers in, Osric says. Sometimes for taxes. Sometimes for favors. Always with coin. Ever been in there yourself? You ask, he snorts. Once. Came out with a bottle of mead, a bruised rib, and no memory of how I paid. So probably. You look again at the curtain. It shifts, someone exits. A short man in a fur hat. He's counting coins as he walks, his mouth twisted into a smug half-smile. He scans the room for someone to gloat to. No one meets his eye, the business behind that curtain doesn't want applause. It doesn't need it, you wonder what it would take to get invited in. A secret? A satchel of coin? The right kind of enemy? Osric answers the question you didn't voice. You get invited. Or you make enough noise that they can't ignore you. And just like that, the tavern takes on layers. The front room, messy and loud, full of ale and laughter, is the stage. But behind the curtain, that's the control booth. You watch two more figures disappear behind it. One in robes. The other in leather and chain. They nod once at the tavern keeper and vanish. The curtain breathes once, then settles, you shift in your seat, your mug suddenly feels lighter. Your clothes colder. Not fear exactly, but alertness. You are aware now, that room isn't dangerous because of what happens in it, it's dangerous because you don't know what happens in it, and in the medieval world, that kind of unknowing could cost you your life or change it. Historians still debate how much criminal enterprise passed through rooms like that. Some argue these places were centers of rebellion and illicit trade. Others insist they were mostly glorified soup kitchens with a few ambitious whispers. Most likely, the truth is somewhere in between. In a world without privacy, those rooms were the closest thing to secrets that could be rented by the hour. Behind you, someone drops a knife, the sound cracks through the air, sharper than expected, you flinch harder than you meant to. Osric doesn't laugh. He just murmurs, easy. They don't bite. Unless you ask nice. The curtain stirs, this time, the tavern keeper emerges, he doesn't look at anyone in particular. But the mood in the room slows. He carries something back with him. Not a thing. A tone. The weight of decision. He adjusts a candle. Picks up a ledger that sat untouched for hours. Opens it. Stares at a page, then, he looks at you, just briefly, then looks away. Nothing happens. Nothing needs to. The message is clear, you're not ready for the back room, not yet, but now, the tavern knows you're here, and that is how it begins. It begins with a thud. A heavy one. Followed by the unmistakable clatter of wood on wood, and then the low rumble of voices warming up like thunder behind a curtain. The drinking has tipped into its next stage. Games have begun, someone shouts, bring the bones, and a cheer ripples through the room. You glance around and spot a man clearing a table with one sweep of his arm, sending mugs and crumbs tumbling to the floor. Moments later, a worn leather cup and a set of carved dice appear, as if summoned by the collective boredom and half-drunken hope of everyone nearby. Osric nudges you and asks if you've ever played. You shake your head. He grins and says, don't. But you watch. The players crowd in fast. Farm hands. Soldiers. A man with no eyebrows. There's yelling, coin slapping, and that peculiar laughter men use when they're pretending not to care about losing money. Games in medieval taverns were as common as spilled stew and just as hard to clean up. Dice, often called bones, were the favorite. Cheap, easy to hide, and quick. Gambling wasn't merely pastime. It was danger. It was relief. It was hope. One lucky throw could mean a meal. One bad roll could mean a night in the street. The first toss lands with a satisfying rattle. Someone curses. Someone else laughs harder than they should. A coin vanishes into a pocket, then again, and again, the game gains rhythm. Dice fly. Wagers climb. So do voices. A red-faced man, bald and built like a collapsed wall, slams his hand on the table and accuses another of cheating. He points at the dice and growls that they're loaded. The accused man shrugs with a smirk and replies that they worked just fine 3 turns ago. The air changes. Chairs scrape. Backs straighten. A knife disappears under someone's sleeve, then a voice cuts through it all. The tavern keeper bellows from the bar, telling them to take it outside or shut it. Nothing more, no one moves, the red-faced man snorts and sits, the dice continue. You exhale. Only then do you notice you'd been holding your breath. Historians still debate whether taverns were places of violence or places that prevented it. Most likely, they were both. A place where tempers could explode or be diffused by a song or a joke. A place where a punch could follow a spilled drink or a marriage proposal could follow a shared loaf of bread. The bard changes tune. Faster now. Brighter. He's trying to outplay the tension, to stuff it back into the corners of the room before it cracks open again. The laughter returns. Not joyful. Edged. Like a knife flipped point up on the table, in one corner, 2 women are arm wrestling. One is biting her lip. The other is biting the table. Near the hearth, a young man tries to impress a group by stacking mugs. His tower collapses. Ale spills. He bows like a court jester. Someone throws a sausage, another game begins near the bar. This one involves tiles, colored stones, and rules only half the players understand. Accusations of sorcery follow almost immediately. A card game is underway nearby. If it can be called that. The cards are hand-painted, worn, and mismatched. One man slams down a card with a chicken on a throne. Nobody reacts. Apparently, that's a strong move. You sip your ale and glance at your hands. You could join, you almost want to, but Osric's warning lingers. This isn't about luck. Not really. It's about status. You haven't earned one yet. Across the room, a man attempts to juggle apples. He's terrible. The third one hits a bean, bounces into a bowl of stew, and disappears into the mouth of a passing dog. The juggler sits down, defeated. The mood shifts again. This time, a little lighter. The earlier threat fades. The tension loosens like a belt after dinner. Someone dares the bard to play upside down. He tries. Fails. Crashes onto the floor. The laughter is real this time. You find yourself smiling. The games aren't just entertainment. They're ritual. They distract from wet boots, from thinning coin purses, from the looming presence of rent and war and cold. In these hours, the tavern becomes a temporary kingdom where luck trumps birthright and laughter defeats hunger. Osric leans back and tells you he once won a pig in a game of dice. You ask what he did with it. Married it, he says with a straight face. You laugh. Then he grins and admits he traded it for a wheel of cheese, which he now considers the worst deal of his life. And for a moment, you forget where you are. You forget the dirt in your boots. You forget the whispers behind the curtain. You just exist here, in this ramshackle symphony of mugs, dice, firelight, and foolishness. Another roll lands. Someone wins. Someone mutters that the dice are cursed. Someone else claims they blinked. And through it all, the tavern breathes like a living thing. Old. Grimy. Full of stories. You drink, you listen, and for the first time tonight, you feel something new. You're not just watching the game, you're almost ready to play. The music never really stops. It just changes shape. It fades, returns, shifts from background hum to center stage and back again. And now, in the lull after the dice games and the stew and the near fistfights, a new sound takes over, a voice, raspy and low, singing a tale no one asked for but everyone listens to anyway. You turn and see him, the bard. He's older than you expected. Not ancient, but worn. His face is weathered in that specific way that says, I've slept in ditches, kissed a duchess, and regretted only one of those. He's missing a tooth. Possibly two. His cloak is patched with every color of failure. And his lute looks like it survived a siege. He's perched on a three-legged stool near the hearth. Eyes half-lidded, strumming gently. The melody is simple. A slow march, almost a lullaby. And the lyrics, well, they're about a knight who fell in love with a goose. Or possibly a woman nicknamed Goose. It's hard to tell, and he doesn't clarify. Either way, the tale is full of longing, betrayal, feather metaphors, and one verse that's clearly improvised on the spot. The crowd loves it. Someone yells, sing the one about the king's left sock. The bard doesn't break rhythm. He just raises an eyebrow and croaks, that one costs extra. Laughter. Medieval taverns weren't just places to drink. They were stages. Bards, minstrels, and traveling players were the Netflix of the 14th century. They didn't buffer, and they couldn't be skipped. If they were good, they were legends. If they were bad, well, you'd better hope they were also fast runners. The bard's voice is scratchy, like gravel soaked in honey, but he knows how to spin a story. His fingers flutter over the strings, and his eyes gleam with each twist of the tale. You catch a line about a prince who disguised himself as a sheep to woo a milkmaid. Someone gasps as if this is breaking news. He changes tunes mid-song, launching into a faster rhythm. The crowd claps along. Badly, offbeat, but with great enthusiasm. A mug falls. A spoon becomes a drumstick. The goat bleats in time. Almost, then, with a flourish, the bard ends. Silence, and then a cheer. Not everyone claps. Some grunt in approval. Some just raise their cups. One man simply nods and mutters, "Better than last time." The bard bows with mock grandeur, then coughs violently into his elbow. It lasts a little too long. Someone offers him a crust. He accepts. You wonder how many miles he's walked with that lute strapped to his back. How many taverns he's played in. How many nights he's traded music for shelter, for stew, for survival. Osric sees your face and mutters, "He's got 3 songs and 2 lies. Been telling them for 20 years. You smile. That tracks, and then, to your surprise, the bard begins again, but this time, it's not a song. It's a story, no melody. No instrument. Just voice. The room leans in. He tells of a sea serpent seen off the coast, big as a cathedral, covered in barnacles and betrayal. He swears he saw it. He swears it winked at him. He swears it stole his boat. Someone scoffs. The bard points at the scoffer and says, "Name 3 things bigger than a cathedral with better manners." The scoffer can't. Another story. About a monk who turned ale into ink and wrote the devil's diary backwards. Then one about a chicken that predicted the weather. You have no idea what's true, but you're listening. Historians note that bards were not merely entertainers. They were news carriers, gossip spreaders, and sometimes outright propagandists. The line between truth and tale blurred easily, especially after 2 mugs of something questionably fermented. The bard ends with a soft whisper about a lost love. Real or imagined, no one asks. He closes his eyes, taps the side of his lute, and leans back into the darkness. You feel the room exhale. There's something sacred about stories in a tavern. Not holy, no incense, no chanting, but sacred in the way that shared humanity is. A room full of people, all filthy, tired, slightly drunk, bound together for a moment by the voice of a man who's seen too much and remembers just enough to sing about it. You raise your mug. He doesn't notice, but he knows. He's done his part. Now, the tavern moves on. A new song begins. This time from the crowd. Someone tries to imitate the bard's voice. Fails spectacularly. A chair topples. Laughter resumes, but in that short space between songs and stew and dice, something lingered, a story, a goose, and the echo of a man's voice, filling the air with more truth than fact. You're still thinking about the bard and his goose when the voices shift again. This time, quieter. Closer. More deliberate. You glance around and realize something subtle has changed. The noise hasn't died, it's just grown sharper, more pointed. Welcome to Medieval Tavern Gossip Hour. You're sitting in the same room, but now you feel like you've stepped into 20 different conversations at once. None of them are about you, but all of them are more interesting than they should be. To your left, 2 men are speaking in hushed tones about a grain shipment gone missing on the way to the abbey. One swears the miller is hiding sacks in a cellar. The other says the cellar has already been emptied. Supposedly by monks. To your right, a woman whispers to another about her cousin's neighbor's wife's 3rd child, who was born with a full set of teeth and a stare like a bishop. A bad omen, she hisses, or a miracle. Depends who you ask. The funny thing is, nobody whispers very well. They try. They lean in close, they shield their mouths, but the tavern is a loud, echoey chamber of warped wood and bad acoustics. Everything carries, especially the juicy bits. You catch the word excommunication, followed by laughter. You lean slightly forward, pretending to sip your ale, and soak in what might be the world's oldest version of a comment section, because this, you're learning, is what taverns are really for: information, news, rumors, conspiracies. Long before newspapers, this was how truth and lies traveled. They moved by ale, by mouth, by people who always begin with "you didn't hear it from me," but historians agree, taverns weren't just watering holes. They were the lifeblood of local communication. Births, deaths, taxes, weather, markets, marriages, who was caught with whose sheep, all of it passed from lips to ears over mugs of thick brown liquid and bowls of questionable stew. Somewhere behind you, a man is telling the story of a blacksmith who forged a horseshoe so perfectly symmetrical that the king himself wept. Next to him, a young woman is describing a dream she had about a flaming duck in an eclipse, and how that definitely means her neighbor is cursed. Again, she adds, helpfully. Osric chuckles. They say old Gerwin's pig speaks Latin on market days. You blink. Does it? He sips. Only in Lent. A man near the hearth raises his voice just enough to draw attention without seeming like he wants it. I'm just saying, he says to no one in particular, if the Duke's son was seen riding through town dressed as a monk, then someone had better ask what happened to the real monk. Silence, then murmurs, then a wave of new conversations ripple outward like a stone tossed into soup. People start drawing closer to the speakers, shifting benches, leaning elbows. It's like watching gossip migrate across a room. One juicy line and suddenly half the tavern is orbiting around the man who claims he saw the Duke's son dressed for penance and possibly drunk. You're about to lean in when a loud thwack distracts you. A woman has just slapped her mug down onto the table and declared, well, I know he's not the father. He's been missing for 6 months. Half the room cheers. The other half boos. Someone mutters, best tale I've heard since the mill fire. You sit back and smile. Because it's not just what they say, it's how they say it. Every story told in this tavern is wrapped in layers of exaggeration, performance, and self-importance. And everyone knows it. No one believes everything. But no one dismisses it all either. The truth, like the ale, is cloudy. You overhear someone talking about a village where a man built a tower out of fish bones. Someone else claims he saw a priest turn invisible. Another says the sun hasn't risen properly since midsummer and it's definitely the cobbler's fault. It doesn't matter what's real, what matters is who tells it, and how many listen. Osric leans in again. You know who listens the most. You shake your head, the tavern keeper. You glance toward the bar. And sure enough, there he is, polishing the same mug, expression blank, ears open. Not reacting. Not judging. Just recording. He knows every scandal before the church does, Osric adds. Probably sells him both sides. And then, like some cosmic joke, the tavern keeper moves to the back. A man you hadn't noticed slips into his place. Small, hunched, forgettable, but everyone around him starts talking louder. You watch carefully. He doesn't speak. Just sips. Listens, a listener. A collector, he could be a taxman. A spy. Or just a man with ears in the right place and debts to pay. Historians still debate how often government spies use taverns to gather intelligence. Some argue it was rare. Others say that if you wanted to know the truth about any town, you didn't go to the bailiff. You went to the barkeep. Suddenly, the bard, who hasn't moved for a while, says without looking up, the problem with secrets is they age faster than the people who keep them. The room quiets, just for a moment, then someone sneezes, a mug spills, and the noise rolls on, but you're left thinking about that, because he's right, and here, in this crowded, crooked, smoke-thick room full of lies and truths holding hands, you realize that gossip isn't noise, it's power, and everyone here is very fluent. At some point, nature calls. Loudly. Rudely. Without apology, you've done your best to ignore it. You've shifted positions on the bench, crossed and uncrossed your legs, sipped ale slowly like that would help. But now it's undeniable. The stew, the bread, the drink. It's all plotting against you, and so you face the truth. You need to find the bathroom, except it's not called that, and it isn't one. You glance around. No signs. No helpful wooden placards shaped like men and women. Just walls, smoke, and a general medieval indifference to your plight. You lean toward Osric, lowering your voice. Where would one? He doesn't even let you finish. Back door, he says. Follow the smell. Not encouraging. Still, you stand, knees cracking, and make your way toward the rear of the tavern. As you pass tables, you notice the same thing happen over and over. People glance up, smirk knowingly, and return to their mugs. No one's fooled. Everyone knows exactly where you're going. You push through a rough plank door that creaks like it's been dreading your touch, and suddenly the warmth of the tavern disappears. You're in a narrow alley behind the building. Cold air bites instantly. The smell hits next. It is sharp, sour, and vaguely aggressive. There's no facility in any modern sense. What you find is a bucket, a wall, and a patch of ground that is, let's say, well used. You stare, then sigh. In most medieval towns, toilets were for the rich. Castles had garderobes, vertical shafts that dumped directly into moats, rivers, or sometimes just onto the street. For the rest of the population, there were chamber pots, ditches, and a lot of creative positioning. Taverns like this usually offered some form of communal shame bucket, occasionally emptied by someone with a strong back and no sense of smell. You make your choice. You do not linger. Behind you, something rustles in the shadows. A rat? A possum? A cursed piece of bread given sentience. You do not investigate. You finish, adjust your layers, and re-enter the tavern with the quiet dignity of someone who just survived an ordeal but refuses to speak of it. The warmth hits you like a hug from a wool-clad uncle. You inhale deeply, grateful for the scent of smoke and sweat and overcooked onions. Anything to erase what just happened. You sit down. Osric doesn't say a word. He just hands you your mug. You nod. This is the bond forged only by shared suffering. Back at the hearth, the bard is humming again, idly plucking his lute. A few patrons glance your way, smirk, and return to their games. You are now, in their eyes, fully initiated. The bathroom situation may be medieval. The politics, however, are timeless. A woman near the door argues with her companion about whether the back corner is actually worse than the ditch behind the fishmonger stall. A man chimes in to declare the stable behind St. Ulrich's Chapel is the cleanest latrine in 5 parishes. No one asks how he knows that. No one wants to. You learn quickly that in this world, there are bathroom loyalties. Every traveler has a story. Some swear by rivers. Others by hedges. One man claims the secret is to never eat beets. A heated debate erupts over whether the town square's rain barrel counts as a wash basin or a shared urinal. Consensus, both. Someone offers you a flask. You decline. Still, this unpleasant errand has taught you something important. Privacy is a luxury. And bodily dignity is optional. Historians remind us that sanitation in medieval towns was, generously speaking, rudimentary. Waste disposal was inconsistent. Streets were sometimes swept by law, often not. The concept of plumbing existed in Roman ruins and monks' dreams. But in daily life, people used what they had and tried not to think about it. You glance at the floor. Damp. Always damp. You look back at your boots. You will burn them, and yet, despite it all, there's something strangely reassuring about the way no one pretends otherwise. No scented candles. No porcelain lies. Just a bucket, a wall, and a communal agreement to never talk about it again. The bard strikes up a new tune. A rowdy one. You catch the phrase miller's trousers and something about a priest with a goat. The room roars, you drink deeply, trying to forget. The tavern keeper catches your eye and gives you a single, almost invisible nod. As if to say, you made it back. Good. Some don't. You want to laugh. But you know he's probably right, and so, with a clearer bladder and slightly more trauma than expected, you rejoin the rhythm of the room, because in a medieval tavern, every return from the back alley is a small victory, and you're practically a hero. You've survived the stew, braved the latrine, evaded the back room and even earned a nod from the tavern keeper. By now, you're basically a regular, except for one detail, you still don't know where you'll sleep, and it's getting late, the crowd has thinned just slightly. A few patrons stumble out into the misty dark, laughing too loudly or singing songs they didn't write. The bard has stopped playing and now snoozes upright, chin on chest, fingers still resting gently on his lute as though afraid someone will steal the melody from his dreams. Osric yawns beside you. Well, he mutters, stretching his arms with the creak of old leather and older joints, time to stake out a plank. You raise an eyebrow. A what? A plank. Or floorboard. Or patch of wall. You'll see. And you do. As the candles burn lower and the fire softens to embers, people start rearranging the furniture. Not in a deliberate way, but in the manner of seasoned sleep scavengers. Benches become beds. Tables become barriers. Someone rolls under a shelf and disappears entirely. You clear your throat and approach the tavern keeper. Is there a bed? He stares at you for a long moment, then says flatly, you see stairs? You look. You do not, no stairs, no beds. You want a pillow, you drink faster. A fair point, historically, taverns were not inns. At least not most of them. An inn had rooms. Hay-stuffed mattresses, maybe even a sheet or two. A tavern had floor space. If you were lucky, the fire was still burning. If you were very lucky, the goat didn't sleep on your chest. You make your way to a relatively unclaimed patch of floor near the hearth and sit. Osric tosses you a blanket, or maybe a curtain. It's coarse, scratchy, and smells like wet straw and potatoes. Don't argue, he says. It was stolen fair and square. You lie back, carefully. The floor is hard, cold, and uneven in a way that seems intentional. Every plank has a bump. Every knot is directly under a vertebra. You shift, sigh, and finally settle into something that almost feels like surrender. Your cloak is your blanket. Your satchel is your pillow. Your dignity is. Well, wherever you left it during that back alley incident, someone nearby snores. Loudly. Rhythmically. A dog answers from the corner with a low, growly whimper. You try to close your eyes, but every noise feels personal. The fire pops. Someone coughs. A mug is knocked over. You breathe slowly, and begin to drift, until something flops down beside you. You open one eye. It's a woman. Her name is Gertrude, apparently. She's wrapped in 4 cloaks and smells like mead, mud, and extremely lived in leather. She smiles at you. Her teeth are present. Then she closes her eyes and begins snoring before you can respond. You stare at the ceiling. It leaks. You move slightly, just enough to avoid the drip, and let out a long, soft groan. This is your life now. There's no privacy. No silence. No proper mattress or embroidered quilt. Just a wooden floor, a mystery companion, and the dying echo of songs you didn't know the words to. And yet, you're warm, you're safe, sort of, and there's something comforting about being part of a pile of people, all equally uncomfortable and too tired to care. In the corner, someone sleep talks about sheep. Someone else mumbles a prayer. The goat sighs. The tavern keeper douses a lantern and mutters, "No fires after midnight." The room dims, the snoring gets louder, and slowly, your eyes close again. Historians note that communal sleeping was common, even expected. Whole families shared beds. Travelers curled up beside strangers. Boundaries were blurred. Privacy, as we know it, didn't exist. You learned to snore in rhythm, or you didn't sleep at all. You're learning now. You turn. Shift. Curl your arms tighter. Pull your blanket thing over your ears, and for a moment, it almost works, until Gertrude kicks you, hard. You don't complain. You've come too far to be defeated by a blanket thief with night terrors, and so you lie still, listening to the creaks and breaths of a room that, even in sleep, feels alive. You smile, sort of, and drift into dreams that smell faintly of ale and onions. You wake up to someone's foot in your ribcage, not aggressively, not with malice. Just the casual sprawl of communal floor sleeping. You open one eye. It's dark, save for a few embers pulsing weakly in the hearth. Around you, bodies. Cloaks. Snores. A half-eaten crust on someone's chest like a pastry offering to the gods of indigestion. You shift slowly, carefully peeling yourself off the floor, bones cracking in protest like an old wooden door. The chill hits instantly. Your breath fogs, your joints ache, your back regrets every life choice that brought you here. You glance at Osric. He's snoring blissfully, face down on what appears to be a broken shield. Gertrude? Still out cold. Her foot remains firmly planted on your hip. You consider going back to sleep. But your brain, buzzing faintly from the ale, stew, and goat proximity, is awake now. And once you're awake in a medieval tavern past midnight, strange things begin to happen. The tavern at night is a different creature altogether. The laughter is gone. The noise softened. What's left is the soft clink of mugs being collected, a broom dragging lazily across the floor, and the quiet philosophizing of the half-drunk. You hear it first from the hearth, a voice, hoarse but rich, speaking slowly. You know what I think? No one asked, no one needs to. I think time's a circle. A goat-eaten, ale-soaked circle. And we're all just crumbs rolling toward the edge. A pause. Then someone replies, "You're a crumb." Laughter follows. Quiet, kind. Then silence again. You sit up, wrap your cloak tighter, and listen. This is the hour when truth, nonsense, and old regrets all sound the same. When strangers confess to the darkness, not because they want advice, but because the fire doesn't interrupt. At another table, two men debate whether stars are holes in the sky or the eyes of saints. What about the moon? One asks, "Bigger hole," the other says. Someone nearby is weeping. Not loudly. Not tragically. Just letting it out. A slow leak of emotion, the kind that stews quietly in the back of your ribs for years and finally escapes when the stews run out and the fire's gone low. You hear the bard murmur something in his sleep. A name, maybe. Or a prayer. His lute lies beside him like a loyal dog. Across the room, the tavern keeper is still awake, behind the bar, sipping from a mug you've never seen offered to anyone else. His eyes are unreadable. Still. But not unkind. He watches over his kingdom of bruised feet and fermented dreams like a man who knows this is the best part. The stillness after the storm, Osric stirs beside you. Groans, then lifts his head. You thinking too loud, he mutters. You apologize. He grunts. Happens. This hour's cursed for thoughts. Historians might describe these hours as the third watch. A stretch of night when travelers toss, monks pray, and taverns settle into a low murmur of human truth. It's a liminal space. A breath held between yesterday's revelry and tomorrow's labor. Someone starts talking about lost love, another wonders what happened to the baker's son who left for the Crusades and never came back. Maybe he got rich, someone says, maybe he found peace. Maybe he just liked being far away. They nod. No one argues. You realize something important. No one here is trying to impress anyone. Not anymore. Not at this hour. The pretense fell off somewhere between the third mug and the first snore. What's left is simple, worn truths. Old wounds. Maybe a song hummed quietly under someone's breath. You lie back down. Gertrude's foot has migrated. It's now tucked under your leg like a cat. Fine. You've stopped caring. You close your eyes. Let the fire's glow flicker against your eyelids. Let the conversations swirl and rise like chimney smoke, curling into dreams, and you think, oddly, about crumbs. Maybe the drunk at the hearth was right, maybe you are just a crumb. Rolling along this uneven wooden floor, bumping into other crumbs, telling stories, getting soggy in the ale of life, you smile, because somehow, it doesn't sound so bad. You don't know what time it is, but the temperature has dropped, the fire's a whisper, and you're just starting to slip back into the kind of sleep where dreams and tavern sounds blur together. When the door bursts open, cold air slams into the room like a drunk ox. The fire flickers. Half-asleep bodies groan. Someone shouts, "Close the cursed door." But it's too late, they are here, 3 of them. Boots heavy, voices loud. Not drunk. Armed. You know that sound. It has an edge. The watchmen have arrived, and they don't knock, they strut in like they own the floor, kicking aside mugs, stepping over cloaks, clanking with the kind of noise that suggests the sound of armor alone might earn them free drinks. Which, to be fair, it usually does. They are not knights. Not guards of some glorious kingdom. No banners. No ceremony. Just local enforcers. Muscle with a badge and very selective memories. The tallest one pulls off his gloves finger by finger, with a slowness that says, "I dare you to speak." His companions fan out, boots echoing on the creaky floorboards. Gertrude stirs beside you, mutters something about onions, then rolls over. The tavern keeper doesn't flinch. He stays behind the bar, polishing a mug with the same energy a parent uses when pretending they didn't hear the crash in the next room. The leader finally speaks. Loud enough to be heard, but not so loud it invites argument. Evening. No one replies. He steps forward. Just checking on things. Making sure all's peaceful. It isn't a question, someone mumbles, was, before you came in. The officer's gaze locks on the offender. A long pause. Then he grins. Good. We like peaceful. And then, with practiced ease, he walks up to the bar and slaps his hand down. The tavern keeper doesn't ask what he wants. He just pours. 3 mugs. No charge. No words. This is the cost of peace. Historically, local watchmen, sometimes called night constables in various towns, varied widely in skill, sobriety, and honesty. Some were volunteers. Others were paid. Many were feared not for their justice, but for their unpredictable wrath. And nearly all of them expected free drinks. The second watchman, younger and clearly trying too hard, saunters over to the hearth. He pokes the bard with the toe of his boot. Play us something. The bard doesn't move. He pokes again, harder. Osric stirs beside you and mutters, "I wouldn't." The bard finally lifts his head. Eyes bleary. Voice hoarse. You want a lullaby or a war song? The watchman grins. Whichever one ends with someone bleeding. The bard coughs. Lullaby, then. He begins to play. Fingers shaky but sure. A slow, minor tune. The kind that makes you think about fog and funerals and the word almost. The tavern listens. The leader of the watch paces slowly through the room. He peers at faces, boots, mugs. You get the sense he's not looking for criminals. He's looking for weakness. For opportunity. For someone too slow to duck a question, he stops in front of you, looks you up and down. What's your name? He asks, you hesitate, traveler, Osric says beside you, before you can answer. Kept to themselves. Paid full. No trouble. The officer considers. Then smirks. We'll see. He walks on, the tension in the tavern is molasses thick. Everyone pretends to go back to sleep, back to sipping, back to anything but watching. But everyone is watching. The youngest officer kicks a dice cup over, spilling bone-carved cubes onto the floor. Illegal gambling? A voice from the back answers, only if you win. More laughter than you'd expect. Not nervous. Just weary, the leader returns to the bar. Downs his drink in one go. Wipes his mouth on his sleeve. Well, he says. Everything seems peaceful. He turns to leave, but stops at the door. Of course, he adds, if anyone hears about something unpeaceful, someone hiding weapons, skipping taxes, spreading stories, it's best to let us know. He looks around the room like a man tossing matches. Better we hear it here than elsewhere. Then they are gone. Doors slamming behind them like a warning, silence returns. For a heartbeat, then someone coughs. A mug clinks. The bard starts his tune again, just a little louder. Osric exhales beside you. We get that once a week. Whether we need it or not. You sit back, you've just met the other face of the tavern. Not the stew. Not the stories. But the shadow system. The quiet deals. The sideways glances. The balance of tolerance and threat. Here, justice doesn't wear white. It wears muddy boots and drinks for free. You sip your mug again. It tastes different now, but you're still warm, and still welcome, and that, for tonight, is enough. The watchmen are gone, but they leave behind a ripple. Not fear exactly, but caution. Conversations don't resume right away. Mugs are sipped more slowly. Eyes stay low, the tavern exhales. Then holds its breath. It's Osric who breaks the silence. Well, he mutters, now that they aren't listening. He glances around and leans in. You want to know where the real decisions get made in this town? You already know it's not in the Lord's Hall. Or the church. Or the courtroom. It's here, he says, thumping the table with a calloused knuckle. Right here. This is where people plot, complain, grieve, forgive, forget, and sometimes, just sometimes, change the world. You chuckle. Seems a little dramatic. He shrugs. So is life. And just like that, the conversations pick up again. But now they're different. Slower. Softer. The kind of talk that only happens when the lights are low and the stew's been digested. At the next table, two farmers debate whether to band together and fix the eastern road, since the local reeve clearly isn't going to. One wants to ask for donations. The other suggests roping in the miller, who's been laundering grain anyway. Near the bar, a woman talks to a merchant about pooling silver to send their sons to apprentice together in the city. She's nervous. He's quietly proud. It sounds like hope, spoken in the currency of whispered plans, by the hearth. A group is arguing. Earnestly. About which saint would make the best mayor. Saint Bridget, says one. Organized. Practical. Wore a cloak that fed orphans. Rubbish, says another. Saint Cuthbert was fair. Kept bees. Bees aren't politics, someone mutters, you're not sure whether it's a joke or a campaign platform. And over near the curtain. Yes, that curtain. There's movement again. This time, not hushed or hidden. A man emerges with a parchment and a pouch. He heads straight to a table in the back and begins quietly divvying coin with three others. You catch a word, shipment. Then another, tax-free. You don't ask, but you notice, because this is what Osric means. The tavern isn't just a place to drink or warm up. It's a town hall, a therapy office, a black market, and a confessional, all rolled into one smoky, overcrowded room with uneven floorboards and a goat. Some historians once claimed that political dissent in medieval times happened in churches and marketplaces. But others argue, quite persuasively, that it often started in places like this, over mugs of bad ale and muttered frustrations. This is where revolts began. Not with shouting in the streets, but with quiet conversations like, what if we just stopped paying? Why do they get to eat meat every day? What if we took the oxen and blamed the reeve? And occasionally, what's the worst that could happen? You glance at the tavern keeper. He's still behind the bar, calm, unreadable. He's heard everything. He's heard plans whispered behind mugs and curses muttered over cards. He knows who's angry, who's afraid, who's about to make a move, and he said nothing, because a good tavern keeper doesn't lead the charge. He just makes sure the door stays open when the revolution limps in kneading stew. Osric leans back, rubbing his chin. You ever notice, he says, that the people in power don't come here unless they're already losing it? You think about it, he's right. No local lord has entered. No knight. No bishop. But the people who carry this place, like the farmers, traders, mothers, brewers, and beggars, are all here. They know the roads, the seasons, the rumors, the injustices, and when enough of them talk, things shift. Even the bard, half asleep, lifts his head to croak. Never underestimate the power of a drunk peasant with a righteous complaint. He coughs, lies back down. Someone near the door starts talking about organizing a new market. One not controlled by the reeve's cousin. Let the buyers come to us, he says, and we set the price. There are nods. Not promises. But seeds. It's all seeds. You realize this isn't just a tavern, it's soil. Ideas get planted here. Watered by ale. Fertilized by frustration. Harvested by those bold or desperate enough to act. You take another sip. The fire pops. The goat sneezes, and in the middle of this noisy, cramped, ill-ventilated space, you feel something unexpected, possibility, because if anything in this world can change, if people can push back, rebuild, speak up, it's going to start right here. In a room full of aching backs, cracked mugs, and people too stubborn to stay quiet, not with swords, with sentences. The first thing you feel is pain, not life-threatening pain. Not dramatic pain. Just that dull, widespread ache that settles in when you've slept on a floor made of splinters, regrets, and whatever passed for insulation in the 13th century. Your neck protests. Your back issues a formal complaint. Your legs feel like they've spent the night negotiating with a goat. In fairness, they probably have. You sit up slowly. Around you, bodies in various states of unconsciousness. One man is curled around a broom. Gertrude is somehow sleeping with both arms crossed and one boot on your lap. Osric snores into a mug like it's an emotional support tankard. You blink, trying to remember how last night ended. Then it comes back, the stew. The dice. The bard. The watchman. The deep 3 a.m. philosophy about crumbs and goats and possible revolutions. And now, dawn, sort of. It's still dim, but there's a new light to the air. A pale, cold silver leaking through the windows, turning smoke into fog and casting long shadows on the warped walls. You stand, bones creaking like old doors, and stretch, and that's when you realize something's missing. Your left shoe. You look down, one bare foot. One booted foot. You look around, the goat stares back at you. You glare, it blinks. You're not ready to accuse, but you make a mental note to watch the goat. Shoeless or not, it's time to face the morning. In medieval tavern terms, that means reassembling your dignity from whatever crumbs remain, trying to find your bag, and hoping you didn't promise to marry anyone last night. You hobble toward the bar. The tavern keeper is already up, of course. He always is. He nods at you once, then sets down a chipped mug of something hot and vaguely brown. Morning tea, he grunts, you sip. It's bitter. Possibly boiled weeds. Possibly just yesterday's ale, reheated and rebranded. Still, it wakes you. Around the tavern, the slow ballet of morning after begins. Someone wakes up and instantly swears. Someone else groans, then remembers who they're sleeping next to and swears louder. A third man stands, farts, and stretches like a satisfied monk. The bard yawns, checks his loot, nods as if it passed inspection. The tavern keeper starts sweeping. Not carefully. Aggressively. Like the floor personally offended him, Osric stirs and groans. Did I say anything last night I have to apologize for? Probably, you reply. He nods. Good. You look around. Your bag's under a bench. Your coin pouch. Lighter. Your dignity. Questionable. Your left shoe, still missing, you spot it eventually. Near the hearth. Being used as a bowl by a child who's scooping what might be porridge or what might be grout from a shared pot, you consider objecting. But it's warm, and it's early, and you've made peace with worse. Historians often romanticize medieval mornings. Sunbeams slanting across fields, fresh bread, church bells in the mist. But most mornings probably look like this: crowded rooms, bad tea, missing boots, and the quiet shame of realizing you sang about sheep in public. Someone sneezes. Someone else starts humming. Someone else is definitely stealing bread, but very politely. The tavern breathes. Stretches. Starts over, and with it, so do the people. A man you heard swearing about taxes last night is now laughing with the tavern keeper. The woman who nearly stabbed someone over dice is calmly braiding her daughter's hair. The merchant in the corner is counting coins again, this time more hopefully, because morning doesn't erase the night. But it softens it. Even the floor looks a little less hostile. You gather your things. Left shoe reclaimed, emptied and wiped on your cloak, you slide it on with minimal grimacing. Your bag's heavier than expected. Someone tucked a hunk of bread inside. You look around, trying to identify your benefactor. No one admits to it. Gertrude winks. Outside, the street is still quiet. Mist clings to rooftops. The world hasn't started yet. You step toward the door. Osric stands beside you. You heading out? You nod. He sighs, adjusts his belt, and says, "Don't forget what you heard in here. Half of it's lies. The other half will get you killed." You smile. "I'll keep that in mind." He claps your shoulder. "Safe travels, traveler." You turn the latch. The door creaks open. And just like that, you step from warmth into chill, from noise into silence, from the messy, living heart of the tavern into the waiting day. You don't look back right away, but you know. The tavern is still there. Breathing. Watching. Holding the conversations and confessions of everyone still inside, and when you return, and somehow, you know you will return, it'll be ready, ale poured, stew bubbling, goat watching. The door shuts behind you with a thud. Not a dramatic slam. Just a heavy, weary sound, like it too had a long night and would rather stay closed. You step into the morning fog, and the silence is so immediate it rings in your ears. Gone is the noise, the laughter, the fire-popping crackle of the tavern. Out here, the world is still. The sky is a dull gray quilt. The ground squelches beneath your boot, and your damp sock reminds you that you forgot about that. The village is barely awake. A single rooster cries, late and unbothered. A woman sweeps her threshold with the kind of expression that says she's swept that spot for 20 years and never once liked it. Farther down the lane. Smoke rises from a chimney and bends sideways in the breeze, uncertain whether to linger or flee. You don't have a destination yet. Just momentum, so you walk, down the uneven path. Past the crooked carts. Past a dog chewing on something best not identified. Past a boy with a wooden sword chasing chickens like they insulted his ancestors. As you leave the main street, the tavern shrinks behind you, vanishing into the mist like it was never really there, but you carry it. The heat of the fire still clings to your clothes. The stew is still on your tongue. Somewhere in your satchel, breadcrumbs mark your passage like edible breadcrumbs for some poor mouse bard who will sing of your crumbs one day. You stop to adjust your boot. That shoe, the one used as a porridge bowl, is still slightly warm. A little squishier than you'd like. But it fits. Somehow, it fits better now. Like your foot has accepted the betrayal, your breath fogs in the cold. You pull your cloak tighter. Somewhere to your left, a bell rings. Perhaps the monastery. Or maybe just someone hitting a pot for attention. The road out of the village isn't paved. It isn't even clear. It's just a suggestion of direction, marked by bent grass, boot prints, and occasional horse droppings. You pick a direction and walk, but your thoughts stay behind. You remember the bard's song about the knight and the goose. The watchman's sneer. The argument about cabbage. The ghost story involving the chimney sweep and the angry eel. You remember the faces. Not their names, necessarily, but their expressions. The woman who sang softly to herself while eating. The boy with bread in his fists. Gertrude's feral snore. You realize you remember the sounds better than the words. That's what taverns do. They don't give you clean memories. They give you textures. Smoke and laughter and warmth and the faint hint of goat. They make you feel like you belonged, even if only for a night. Even if no one said it out loud, historians write about kings and battles and taxes. But they rarely write about what it felt like to walk out of a tavern with stiff legs, half a hangover, and a heart that feels different, maybe not lighter, but looser. Something got unknotted. Maybe it was the ale, maybe it was the talk, maybe it was the goat-related humility, but whatever it was, you carry it now. Like a stone in your pocket. Small. Unassuming. But solid. You pass a crooked sign nailed to a tree. It reads, "To market, 6 miles." The letters are uneven. The arrow points to a puddle. Classic. You smile. You have no map. No schedule. No reason to hurry. But your feet move anyway. Because you've rested. You've eaten. You've listened and laughed and been still for the first time in weeks. And now, somehow, that gives you permission to move again. Behind you, the village wakes, the smoke thickens, the noise builds, and the tavern, still there, still crooked, still warm, still waiting. Maybe it's already full of new travelers. Maybe Osric's telling your story, badly. Maybe the bard's writing a new verse. Maybe the goat has found another shoe. You don't look back. You don't need to, because the tavern isn't something you leave, it's something you take with you. You walk for hours. Not quickly. Not aimlessly either. Just that steady, post-tavern pace that says, I've survived something soft and strange, and now I'll take my time with whatever comes next. The road changes. Sometimes it's dirt. Sometimes gravel. Sometimes just a series of slightly suspicious puddles daring you to guess how deep they go. You guess wrong. Twice. By midday, the fog has thinned. Sunlight filters through like it got distracted on the way and forgot to fully commit. Birds sing. A cart rumbles by, pulled by a mule with the world's worst attitude. The driver nods. You nod back. You're not headed anywhere in particular. But the tavern has left you with something. Not direction. Not clarity. Just stillness. The kind that lingers after the noise dies down, when your body is tired, your belly is full, and your soul feels like it's had a long bath in warm chaos. You think about that place, the stew. The dice. The bard's goose. The gossip about the duke. The phantom back room. The laughter that burst out of strangers like it had been waiting for years. you remember the snoring pile of bodies like some strange communal nest, and how, against all logic, you slept. How the groans and creaks of that crooked tavern somehow lulled you like lullabies never could, and now that you've left, you realize it's changed you, a little, not in grand, cinematic ways. You didn't find religion. You didn't learn swordplay. You still don't know where taxes really go, but you feel a little softer around the edges. A little more porous. Like the noise of the world can come in again. And maybe, just maybe, you'll let it, because that's what a tavern does at its best. It breaks you open with heat and hunger and noise, then it fills you up. Sloppily. Sometimes drunkenly. Sometimes beautifully. And when it lets you go, you're different. You might not even realize it until days later, when you're sitting by a fire, and someone says, "Remember that story about the monk and the eel?" And you laugh. Really laugh. From somewhere that hadn't laughed in a while, you'll talk about the goat. The stew. The bard's mysterious third tooth. And you'll find yourself saying, "It wasn't much. Just a tavern." And you'll know that's not true, because places like that are rare, not for their age. Or their charm. Or their stew with mysterious floating bits, but for their ability to hold people together. To press them close in their weakness. To make them feel, for a few hours, like the world made sense. Or at least like it didn't need to, and as you walk, dusty, sore, shoot again but forever suspicious of livestock, you carry it, the sound of clinking mugs, the bard's raspy lullaby, the smell of fire, onions, and spilled secrets, and the feeling that, no matter where the road leads, there's a place where the door creaks, the floor groans, and someone always has a story to share. Even if it's absolute nonsense, especially if it's nonsense, because that's where the good stuff lives, in laughter shared with strangers, in warmth passed like mugs, in being part of something that asks nothing but your presence, so you keep walking, lighter, fuller, still digesting, and somewhere. Back in that village, the tavern glows faintly in the dusk, ready for the next wanderer who stumbles in muddy, cold, and unsure. It will feed them, warm them, mock their shoes, and send them back into the world, a little more human than before. Now, wherever you are. Whether curled in bed, or sinking into your couch, or just letting your thoughts float gently above your pillow. Let it all soften, let your breath slow, let the weight of today slide gently off your shoulders like a cloak warmed by firelight. You've walked into a place filled with noise, chaos, and comfort. You've laughed with strangers. Slept among the loud and the lost. Sipped something questionable but kind. And now, you're walking away again, carrying only what you need, a feeling, the kind that hums low in your chest and says, "You belong." Even in strange places, you don't have to remember every name. Every story. Every goat-related incident. Just remember how it felt. To be welcomed. To be tired, and full, and surrounded by others just as human as you. Let that memory sink into your bones now, let the sounds fade. Mugs settling. Fire crackling. A bard humming something almost like a lullaby. Let your breath fall into rhythm with that quiet. The road outside is long. But it can wait, for now, you're still warm, still resting, still wrapped in the invisible embrace of a place you never expected to find. And maybe never will again, but that's okay, because for tonight, you made it inside, and you're home. Sleep well, traveler.